was a period when the Negro was complacently adjusted to segregation, discrimination, insult, and exploitation. And the period of tension is the period when the Negro has decided to rise up and break loose from that. And this is the peace that we are seeking, not an old negative, obnoxious peace, which is merely the absence of tension, but a positive, lasting peace, which is the presence of brotherhood and justice.
So again, Dr. King talking about the tension. I mentioned a little bit about tension and how there was no tension when blacks were complacent, when they were okay with, maybe not okay, but just not fighting for justice. And as soon as they began to fight for justice, it created a tension. And what Dr. King is saying is that tension is good. That tension is healthy. That tension is necessary in order to see to get to the objective, which is freedom. And basically that when you're going for freedom, when you're trying to take it to the next level, that tension is a necessary product. Tension is a necessary outcome of doing that. And, you know, the last 2 weeks we talked about goals. And one of the things that I talked a bit about was resistance. You set a goal, you have a vision, you set the goal. And when you make that declaration, the next thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a certain level of resistance that shows up. You can call that resistance tension, right? Whenever you wake up and you say, hey, this is important to me, I'm going for this, whether it's freedom, whether it's justice, whether it's taking your life to the next level, there will be tension. And we have to learn how to get comfortable living in that tension. There was an article that I saw for Inc.com where it talked about the moment that you get in your comfort zone, your brain actually shuts down. When you're comfortable, your brain is not working at the capacity that it will work when you are uncomfortable. When you are outside of your comfort zone is when you can learn the best. And and many of us, we're comfortable. We're comfortable this morning, and are you willing to get uncomfortable and begin creating tension towards the things that we know we want to achieve, the things that we know we want to see? All right, so this last clip I want to share, I'm going to take a few phone calls, but it's a great way to end the show because Dr. King talks about how the universe and God are on the side of justice, and all that is required is for us to take some action. I mean, it sounds so close to when I had the series How to Go to the Next Level. One of the things I talked about was Frederick Douglass, and he said, I prayed and prayed for 20 years and nothing happened until I used my legs. Right? He prayed and prayed for freedom for 20 years and nothing happened until I used my legs, right? It was his faith plus his action that created what it was that he had been praying for. Many of us, we're praying for things, but are we adequately taking action on those things? Are we adequately taking action? So again, the topic of conversation, if you're joining us today, is the impact of Ghana on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and when he went to witness the independence ceremonies of Ghana. And one of the other things he talks about in the speech, I'm not going to play the clip, but one of the other things he talks about in the speech is this notion of independence and how he felt about the independence. He had a radio interview when he was in Ghana, and the interviewer, who was Etta Moulton Barnett, asked him, when you knew that you were coming to Ghana, how did you feel? And King replies, well, the minute I knew I was coming to Ghana, I had a very deep emotional feeling. Thinking of the fact that a new nation was being born, symbolized something of the fact that a new order is coming into being, and an old order is passing away. So that I was deeply concerned about it, and I wanted to be involved in it and be a part of it and notice the birth of this new nation with my own eyes. So that is why I'm here. And so later in the interview, Barnett asked him a series of questions, and the questions were, so I'll read the whole statement. Reverend King, do you feel having a feeling about the far-reaching influence of this particular occasion in the history of mankind, in the history of people of color all over the world, how far do you think it will reach? How much do you think it will influence the affairs of man that we're interested in? And King goes on to say, I think this event, the birth of this new nation, will give impetus to oppressed people all over the world. Now, before I keep going, let's give some context that Ghana was the first of these African countries to actually gain their independence, all right? And what many people don't know is that Kwame Nkrumah, who became the prime minister of Ghana at that point, Kwame Nkrumah got his education here in the States, began to see the impact of racism while here in the States, and saw the correlation, the parallel of racism to colonialism in Africa. And then, after getting educated here in the States at Lincoln University, receiving his master's, he then went on to London to take up more studies on the impact of colonialism, like understanding the structure of it so he could understand how this was having an impact on Ghana. And so then when he got back to Ghana, he joined a number of different, he joined a political party, and the name doesn't come to mind right now. He joined a political party, and upon joining that political party, noticed that they weren't moving aggressively enough. And so as a result, left that party, started another one of his own, where they really began to create waves in terms of the British control, established control over Ghana. And I believe it's in 1950, Kwame Nkrumah was thrown in prison. So when you heard earlier in the show where Dr. King talks about, we may have to go to prison, and that freedom doesn't come easy, that was one of the references that he was making, and that's why it was so powerful that when Kwame Nkrumah received, when he actually became, by the way, he was elected prime minister while in prison. Okay? He was elected prime minister while in prison. And that's something I didn't know, even being there. I didn't know that until I began to do this research on King. And so they had to let him out because he was elected the new prime minister of Ghana. And that's one of the reasons why when he gave his, acceptance speech, he wore his prison clothes to in some way signify the work that it took to gain that freedom. And later here in the text where King is providing this answer around whether or not this is an impactful occasion on others all over the world, and he said he goes on to say, I think it will have worldwide implications and repercussions, not only for Asia and Africa, but also for us in America. As you well know, we have a problem in America, right? And he goes on to talk more about that. But then, King, being the visionary that he is, goes on to, in many ways, use the parallel of the American Revolution in 1776 to that of our own. And how the struggle for freedom often feels like it's impossible, but when a people are persistent, that they can achieve the impossible. And so I think those were the main marks of the interview that Dr. King gave while in Ghana about his trip to Ghana. All right. So, I'm going to share this last clip, and then I want to talk about the importance of committed visionaries. Because when I think about our community today and what we're faced with, yesterday my wife and I, we're moving around the house, and I think many of us are unsettled by this Laquan McDonald verdict and Jason Van Dyke, shooting him 16 times and receiving, in many ways, what is a slap on the wrist, right? I'm reminded of the young lady who was in sex trafficking, and she killed the man that was raping her, and they put her in prison, and it took a governor. I mean, she was in prison how long?
15 years.
15 years. She was 16 years old when it happened. So not only was this man committing a crime, right, and just being in the room with her, but she was a victim of sex trafficking. And here she is. She decides to defend herself at 16 years old, kills this man, and she's basically thrown in prison. They throw away the key. And just recently, after 15 years being released for that, right?
Yeah.
And then here is Jason Van Dyke, who kills a black man in cold blood and is, virtually given a slap on the wrist. I mean, 6 3/4 years. And
he only has to do 2 inside.
Yeah, he'll do 2 and he'll be out. And I think that's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point, is that your life isn't important. And if that's not a form of oppression, I don't know what is. I mean, I have a black son. You're a young black man. I'm a black man. Many black men hear my voice. And that it's a degrading feeling.
It's a scary feeling.
Yeah.
You don't feel safe. The thing that gets me is the fact that they lied on the report, for a year.
Mm-hmm.
They said that he attacked them, and then to see the video of the young black man walk away and him just pulling up, getting out the car, and emptying a clip on him 16 times.
It shows the disregard for his life. And so there's still a lot of work to be done. My point is this. One of the things that I put in my notes is when I think about the leaders of the early 1950s and 60s, these were committed visionaries. Mama D talked about Dr. King being, not necessarily being a dreamer, but I believe they were dreamers, right? Vision, to be a visionary means that you have to be able to see something that isn't. And there's an intentional dream. And I talk about intentional dreamers in my book. You have wishful thinkers or wishful dreamers. These are people who dream and they don't do a thing, right? They have one dream after the other. And then you have intentional dreamers who they dream, they create a vision, and they take action. And today, if you've been listening to the program, I want you to ask yourself a question. Are you an intentional dreamer? Are you a committed visionary? Are you someone who is willing to put it all on the line in terms of what it is that you believe in and do the work that is necessary to see it through? I think many of us, we have a threshold. Kwame Nkrumah spent years in prison to realize his dream. Nelson Mandela spent years in prison to realize his dream. Dr. Martin Luther King spent time in prison, spent time being persecuted, spent time being beaten, spent time along with many others, right? And eventually gave his life for his vision. And today, are you a committed visionary? Many of us, the visions that we have, whether it's for our lives or for the community, you know, we don't have to undergo the same level of scrutiny, the same level of injustice, the same level of physical pain, the same level of mental anguish that our predecessors had to go through. And will we allow the comfort of our present situation to push us back, or will we continue to push for that intentional dream? Continue to push with persistence around the vision that we have, remaining committed to that vision as we move forward. With that, I want to play the last clip that I have from the speech, "The Birth of a New Nation" by Dr. King, before we begin to close the show.
It is never brought about without this temporary period of tension. The road to freedom is difficult. Finally, Garner tells us that the forces of the universe are on the side of justice. That's what it tells us now. You can interpret Garner any kind of way you want to, but Garner tells me that the forces of the universe are on the side of justice. That night when I saw that old flag coming down and the new flag coming up, I saw something else. That wasn't just an ephemeral, evanescent event appearing on the stage of history, but it was an event with eternal meaning, for it symbolizes something. That thing symbolized to me that an old order is passing away. And a new order is coming into being. An old order of colonialism, of segregation, of discrimination is passing away now. And a new order of justice and freedom and goodwill being born. That's what it said. Somehow the forces of justice stand on the side of the universe. That you can't ultimately trample over God's children and profit by it.
If you heard that last part, you cannot trample over God's children and profit by it. So, let me tell you another reason why I'm so interested in Africa. When I was growing up, I remember